Every journey begins with a single step. For our friend, the hydrogen atom, that step is a bold leap from being part of a water molecule to an emissary of energy. In the heart of an electrolysis chamber, powered by renewable energy, water is transformed. Oxygen steps back, releasing the vibrant hydrogen atom. Alone, hydrogen is volatile, but when paired with captured CO2 and the help of a touch of alchemy, together, they forge a potent synthetic fuel. A new energy carrier, clean, efficient, ready to power our world. Innovative companies are investing in the production of e-fuels, which can then be distributed via the existing infrastructure to industry and consumers, providing them with a climate-friendly alternative to conventional fossil fuels. Aviation, maritime, heavy goods transport, even your car, e-fuels power a wide range of sectors and offer a sustainable solution to our diverse energy and mobility needs. We at the eFuel Alliance embrace the entire value chain and give it a face and a voice. Our goal is political acceptance and regulatory consideration of e-fuels as a significant contribution to sustainable climate protection. In the quest for green energy, e-fuels are an essential piece of the puzzle, linking today's infrastructure to a more sustainable future. The eFuel Alliance is powering this transition, forging a path from hydrogen to hope, because the future of energy is now.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to attend our event, Going Once, Going Twice, Results and Lessons Learned from the First Hydrogen Bank Auction. When the Commission published the results at the end of April, it was great to see that the first auction attracted 132 projects from 17 countries across Europe, leading to a 15-fold oversubscription of the designated funding budget of 800 million euros. The high level of participation is a clear signal that the sector is willing to deliver and invest in forward-looking technologies. But it also shows that there is a great demand for support to finance the decarbonization of Europe's industry and the transition away from fossil fuels. At our today's webinar, we would like to take a closer look to the results. What do they tell us about the emerging renewable hydrogen-based industry? What price is acceptable to off-takers and companies? And is the willingness to pay for renewable hydrogen the same across the different sectors? The result provides us with highly valuable insights into where the sector is heading and what challenges it is facing. That's why today we also want to look ahead and discuss what lessons we can learn from the next round of the Hydrogen Bank auction, this is expected to be launched at the end of this year. What can be done better? What do we need to pay more attention to next time? And I'm delighted to have such distinguished panelists from the European Commission and Frontier Economics at our event today to discuss these vital issues. So you will have results and answers. Johanna Schiele is a policy officer of DG Climate, working on the design and implementation of the EU-wide auction for renewable hydrogen production at the EU Innovation Fund, under the umbrella of the EU Hydrogen Bank. And her colleague, Javier Garcia Fernandez, who is also part of the Innovation Fund's team that has been developing the European-level auctions for renewable hydrogen, deals with e-fuels in particular. Matthias Jensen, Associate Director of Frontier Economics Office in Cologne, who has extensive experience in analyzing the economics of hydrogen and advises companies and public institutions on the topic related to the market design, regulation, and climate policy in general. When we, the eFuel Alliance, decided to organize this webinar and the list of speakers was finalized, I was really looking forward to their presentations and curious to hear all your questions and comments. But I think you will have an inspiring discussion and you have a lot to cover. So let's go started without further ado.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Also from me, a very warm welcome and thank you to Monica. We recorded this video beforehand because unfortunately there was her flight was rescheduled, and even though she was really looking forward to be with us today, I'm afraid she's sitting on a plane and will have to watch the recording once she has solid ground. I'm delighted that so many of you are able to join us today to discuss this exciting topic. Right now, I can see that there are more than 230 people online with us. But as Monica said, we had much to discuss, but only 1 hour to do it in. So let's press ahead and welcome our first two speakers from the European Commission, Johanna Schiele and Javier Garcia Fernandez, both part of DJ Climate's Innovation Fund team working on the design and implementation of EU-wide auction for the production of renewable hydrogen. And they're here today to share their insights and experience on this topic with us. Johanna, I think it's ladies first, and you are going to start us off before your colleague Javier will give his perspective, maybe with a particular focus on e-fuels. So, Johanna, the floor is yours, please.
Actually, we're going to do it just the other way around, but thank you very much for the nice introduction. We have a short presentation for you, and Javier will kick you off, and I will continue.
So, hello everyone. So I will start and I will share my screen to be able to share also the presentation that we're going to be making. So please let me know if you can see my screen. Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see our presentation?
Yep, it's working, Javier. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone. Thank you to e-fuels for this invitation, and also thank you for the introductions. So today we were invited to speak about this pilot action that we launched from the Innovation Fund as part of the framework of the European Hydrogen Bank, and that we launched it last year in 2023 in November, and we closed it in February. The results were made public in April the 30th, and that is part of what we are, of course, presenting today. So with me, Johanna, and me, we both, as we were introduced, we were in the Innovation Fund as part of this team preparing the auctions within the fund. So for those who are not familiarized yet with the auction, just a quick overview of what we've done. So we launched an auction by the end of last year following the mandate of the European Hydrogen Bank initiative, seeking to provide to the market an easy and simple mechanism to allocate funds from, in this case, the Innovation Fund, and in this case, allocating 800 million to support the production of renewable hydrogen. In fact, what we were supporting is the renewable fuel of non-biological origin, RFNBO hydrogen, as defined in the delegated acts of the Renewable Energy Directive. The way that we were providing the support, and we decided to do, is through a fixed premium. That is, to be very clear, we are not supporting the full LCOH or the full cost of producing hydrogen. We are just trying to fill that gap between the cost of producing the hydrogen and the willingness to pay from the demand. And we're providing that support for a maximum period of 10 years. We have, for that, organized this auction based on which bidders will be ranked on price, and they will be awarded on a pay-as-bid basis. No? So what is bidded is what is awarded. And on top of the ranking, we define a certain list, certain conditions that to guarantee the minimum quality of the proposals that have been received that were evaluated on a pass-fail basis. Payments under the auction organized by the Innovation Fund are only received upon presentation of actual production of renewable hydrogen. So there is no pre-financing in our schemes, and these payments are received by the other projects on a semi-annual basis. So this is very quickly summarized what we've done. And well, when we launched the auctions, we were actually, one of the main objectives of the auction is to have more information about the market. And well, we have also quite an expectation about its success, if it would be able to attract enough participation. And indeed, well, we are very happy to say that it did attract a lot of attention. We received 132 bids from 17 different countries from the European Economic Area, which we success just by terms of participation, a success. And of course, this is a success because a bid or an auction depends on the efficiency of the auction depends on the participation. Besides only 13 projects failing at the stage of admissibility and eligibility, that means the key aspects are checked at the beginning to check the quality, the basic quality of the proposals received. 7 projects have been successfully pre-selected. That means that now they have invited to sign a grant agreement with the executive agency, CINEA, which is the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environmental Executive Agency, who's in charge of evaluating, selecting, and then afterwards monitoring the projects. And only once they have signed the grant agreements, we will consider that they have been awarded. In total, out of the 800 million euros that we made available, we have allocated 720 million approximately, which again is a success, with a clearing price of 48 cents per kilogram of hydrogen for the fixed premium, which it was even surprising for us. We know that this has been low. We only had a reference of the Danish auction that was organized at the end of last year by December, I think, that had as a result a support of €1 per kilogram, also as a fixed premium. But under our auction at European level, we have gone even lower. In the map that I'm projecting to the right, you can see that the highest number of projects were received from Spain. Actually, almost a third of the countries have been received from Spain, followed by countries like Germany and Norway. So out of this, what about these 7 projects that have been pre-selected? Well, as you can see, the bids that we received went from the 37 cents of Energy Lati, located in Finland, to the 48 of MP2X in Portugal. There's a high representation of Iberian projects due to the lower cost of renewables, as well as Scandinavian projects located in Finland and Norway that also have access to cheap renewable energy. This should not be a surprise to anyone, and we are happy to see that these results are consistent. The size of the projects that we have received vary a lot. We are going from the 8 million euros requested as grant support from Hycentia to more than 245 million euros of support requested by M2X. So there is a high variety in the size of the projects that we're receiving. In total, we're willing to be able to support through these projects the installation of 1.5 gigawatts of electrolyzer, and with that contributing to the objectives of the European hydrogen strategy. Indeed. One of the things that we wonder when we saw these low bids at the beginning is, well, are these outliers are actually particularly low bids? And what you can see by this bid curve that I'm showing now in screen is that actually now it's kind of a continuous curve, which demonstrates and proves that actually, well, there were quite a high amount of projects that were willing to bid at low levels and be in below €1 per kilogram, which it is a message to us that the hydrogen market is starting to be ready and actually is now very dynamic. We had an oversubscription of 15 times the available budget. As you can see also in this curve, there's a high representation of Southern European countries and Scandinavian countries to the right of the curve, right? So the projects that were able to bid the lower. Regarding the participation, as I said, Spain has been particularly well represented, followed by Germany, Portugal, Finland, and Norway. And it's also Spain, the country that has been leading the amount of megawatts proposed for installation, with almost 3 gigawatts instead of electrolyzers being proposed for installation, followed again for Germany and Scandinavian countries. And another very interesting piece of information, of course, is what is the actual price of hydrogen in the auction. As I said, part of the objectives of the auction is to provide enough transparency to the market provide that price discovery, how much renewable hydrogen costs. And our clearing price is a fixed premium. So it's just filling the gap between that cost of production and what demand is willing to pay. But we also, of course, have analyzed, well, how much is renewable hydrogen costs. And what we've seen is the average cost of renewable hydrogen across Europe from the bids that we have received is in the order of 8.5 euros per kilogram. That, of course, it is just a very tentative figure now, because the amounts vary a lot. They go from 5 to 12 euro per kilogram. And the values of the cost of the hydrogen per country depends, of course, a lot on the amount of projects that we have received from each of those countries. So while the price of 5 euro per kilogram that we have in average from Spain can be quite representative, since we have 46 projects being received from them. If you go to the price that we are reflecting on screen in France, which is around 12 euros per kilogram, may not be that representative indeed, because we have only 5 projects from that country being received. So even if this is informative, this has to be taken as an information from a certain amount of projects that are front runners, and also projects that are willing to take higher risks, of course, to be the first ones. So, but still, we think that this is a very valid information regarding the formation of the market. One of the requirements that we had in the pilot action, it was to make projects enter into operation within 5 years after signing the grant agreement. This figure of 5 years was widely discussed during the preparation of the auction, and actually for us it was also we were very we had a lot of expectations to see what the projects were actually proposing to us, or to enter into operation within that framework or not. And actually what we've seen is that, well, more or less on average, projects are willing to enter into operation, are able to promise to enter into operation within 3 years. And this is important because if projects are selected and invited to sign a grant agreements, they will have to prepare to have a completion guarantee with a commercial bank, and therefore this commitment becomes serious. Now it becomes binding for them with the related penalization. So knowing that most, or at least half of the proposals were able to commit to enter into operation with a figure below 3 years, that means for us that the market is becoming more mature than expected originally. And that is why we're changing actually now the conditions for the second round, being more requiring at maturity levels. So with that quick overview, I also give the word to my colleague, Johanna, who can deep in a bit more into the details of technologies and off-takers that have been, that we have received into the auction. Johanna, please.
Thanks very much, Javier. So I would like to talk a little bit about what the projects look like that we receive bids from. I can already see some questions on the offtake in the chat, so hopefully the next slides are going to respond to at least some of those questions. But first, let us talk a bit about the technologies that bid into the auction. So we see that roughly half of the bids received intend to use alkaline technology, whereas roughly half intend to use PEM. And what's noticeable here is that we don't see any SOEC electrolyzers, so no high temperature electrolyzers. I think that's not a big surprise, given that SOEC is much more expensive than alkaline or PEM, and this auction is clearing based on price. However, that is not to say that the Innovation Fund is not also supporting SOEC, but we see those projects more applying to our regular grants program, also because SOEC is often integrated in an industrial process where there's a source of steam or heat. So in this auction, which is purely clearing on price, we see alkaline and PEM dominating. Maybe one interesting thing to notice here, and we dug a little bit deeper into the project proposals as well, is if you look at these little diamonds on the slide, they indicate the average levelized cost of hydrogen by projects and technology. And we actually see that the 10 projects that intend to combine both alkaline and PEM managed to achieve a lower LCOH on average. And looking into these projects, we see that they have especially intelligent dispatch strategies, and they really make the most out of combining alkaline, which is slightly cheaper on the capex, but slightly less flexible on the ramping behavior, and PEM, which is slightly more expensive on the capex, but can follow the intermittent profile of renewable electricity in a more flexible way. And combining these two gives you a cost advantage. Next slide, please. Great. Now, this is a question and some data that people have been eagerly awaiting. We have a big debate on local content and whether the technology or the equipment used in our projects is coming from the EU or not. Some of you may be following also the Net Zero Industrial Act, the EU's more recent policy on supply chain resilience. So we decided to make data on the origin of the electrolyzer public. Maybe a bit of a caveat here: at the point of bidding, projects only needed to have pre-contractual relations with the electrolyzer manufacturer. So this data is based on MOUs or letters of intent that were submitted at the bidding stage. They're not contractual yet. What is encouraging is that roughly half of the projects intend to procure their electrolyzer from the EU. So the manufacturing of the electrolyzer is in the EU, whereas roughly a quarter is both non-EU and a mix of EU and other. This is what you see when you look at the left-hand side of the slide. And then we give a little bit more detail on the right-hand side of what these countries are. Now, I'm trying to help you to decode this chart a little bit, because the bar that you see with the 44 projects intending to procure electrolyzers from multiple sources, that includes the 30 on the left-hand side, mix EU and other. And actually these 30 are mostly combinations of US and EU, because there are some manufacturers that have manufacturing sites both in the US and the EU, but it's not clear from the MOU yet in which manufacturing location the electrolyzer will be produced. There are very few or no companies that have manufacturing locations both in the EU and in China. And then you can see in terms of the projects that intend to procure foreign technology or non-EU technology, China is in the lead with 20 out of 130 of the bids. And then we see some projects intending to procure from the US, from India, or from the UK. Now, this slide is looking at the offtake or the revenue side of the projects. We often talk about willingness to pay. And this is different from the cost of grey hydrogen. So we can in theory finance up to 100% of the cost gap between grey hydrogen and green hydrogen. But projects have an incentive to not bid in the price gap between green and grey, but to bid in the price gap between the levelized cost of hydrogen and the revenues they can actually achieve in the market. So that's the willingness to pay of the off-taker, which is, as we can see here, often quite a bit higher than the grey hydrogen price. So if you look at the top right of this chart, you see that the median expected offtake price by industry off-takers is around €5.70, and the median expected offtake price by projects with a mobility off-taker is around €8.34. Overall, 2/3 of projects intend to have a main off-taker in the industry sector, and roughly 1/3 intends to have a main off-taker in the mobility sector. We have received a lot of questions about the off-take sectors and also the willingness to pay by subsector, so slightly more detailed breakdown than industry and mobility. And I can say that we will provide this data in the coming days. We're going to publish a couple of more slides that go into more detail on offtake price by subsector. If you go to the next slide. So talking about subsectors, we've already published a list of the top 10 subsectors within industry. That includes really a wide range of projects. We see methanol producers, fertilizer producers, refining, steel, chemicals, ammonia, but also slightly more niche applications like hydrogen used in the glass industry or for industrial gases. And on the mobility side, we do see a lot of heavy duty mobility, so trucking, bus, aviation, forklifts, logistics, etc. but also hydrogen sold to more aggregator type off-takers like refueling stations. Great, so now we dumped a lot of data on you, but we also want to give you an overview of how we see this in the big picture and compared to the objectives that we had when designing this auction. So when we designed this auction last year, we had 4 main objectives in mind. We want to contribute to reducing the cost gap between renewable and fossil hydrogen in the EU. We want to allow for price discovery and the formation of an actual renewable hydrogen market, where at the moment hydrogen is not yet a traded commodity, but rather traded over the counter, so there's not that many data points. We want to de-risk the project sufficiently for banks to come in based on our subsidy, and we want to reduce the administrative burden both for projects but also for us as the evaluators. And I think on all of these objectives, we can say that the auction was a success. The application is significantly simplified and shorter than the regular grants application. The auction closed in February, and we managed to publish the results after less than 3 months at the end of April. So that's hopefully a fast and satisfying turnaround time for everyone who was bidding, but also for the people waiting for results. We see that these projects can achieve quite low capital costs, and that private funding and loans, not just equity, is coming into these projects. So the third objective is also fulfilled. We hope that the data presented today and made public on our website is really helping for price discovery. And of course, there's caveats to the depth of the data and the data quality, and you certainly cannot read, for example, our levelized cost of hydrogen figures at the cost of hydrogen in that country. Many countries only had 2 or 3 or 4 bids, so you can't read it like that, but at least it's a beginning to start to understand and analyze where the market is at. And lastly, reducing the cost gap. I think this is something that we'll have to monitor over time and over multiple auction rounds that we will have. How is this clearing price developing over time? Which factors lead to higher bids versus to lower bids? And as we also adjust the auction design, which effect on the bid level would you expect in the next round? And I guess we're going to have a lot of questions in the Q&A session of the seminar on that point. Now, lastly, let me give you a short outlook for 2024. We plan to launch the next round of this hydrogen auction by the end of this year. So end of November, start of December, roughly the same time as we launched last year. And it will again be launched together with the regular call for proposals under the Innovation Fund. So we'll have one big launch, both for the regular grants and for the auction. We have published the draft terms and conditions for the second round on our website, and we're currently asking for written feedback on these draft T&Cs. And then on the 12th of June, we are going to have a stakeholder event where we will discuss your feedback with you. We'll then go away and reflect on that and publish the final T&Cs by the end of the summer, which again means that projects will have a bit of time to digest the final T&Cs, to start preparing their bids before the auction launches at the end of the year. And with that, I assume we're going to have some questions, so please shoot.
Yes, thank you very much, Johanna and Javier, for this very comprehensive overview. And yes, there are already a lot of questions, but maybe before we open the discussion to questions from the audience, first of all, a question to you too, or an organizational one. Would you have maybe 5 or 10 minutes afterwards? I know it is scheduled under 2 o'clock, but in case there's so many, I mean, we won't be able to cover all the questions, but just in case, so if you could stay a bit longer on the webinar. Okay, so if not, so then let's press on.
Sorry, because we have just a meeting afterwards. So
okay, so then, because we still have one more speaker, a warm welcome to Matthias Jansen, Associate Director at Frontier Economics, who, as any who has read his work will know, has the greatest experience on climate policy and the economics of hydrogen in particularly. Matthias, so when you saw the outcome of the first auction, what was your take? And if I'm not mistaken, You also looked at similar auctions in the UK and in Denmark. How did they compare?
Yeah, thank you very much, Agara. I hope you can all see me and hear me, because I'm stranded in an over train station on my way to Berlin from Cologne. But does that work?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, thanks.
Excellent. Great. So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and for having me here, and also to Javier and Johanna for the insights. Yes, indeed, Agara. I have looked into the other auctions as well. So let's jump into it and build on what we just heard. We just on Front Economics, we are an economic consultancy working across Europe in energy in particular, and working across the whole value chain on hydrogen. We also work for public authorities, also the European Commission, mostly DGNA though. So we have not supported the Commission on this auction, but we have advised clients on the bidder side. But with that, let's jump into it. So indeed, I guess the most interesting result and also kind of surprising for many observers was the comparably low bid, which was, as Johanna and Javier said, like below 0.5 euros per kilogram. And that was significantly lower than in a UK auction that was held in December last year. And now I guess like many ask, like how come these differences? And if we look into kind of some key characteristics of the two auctions, then what we see is the budget on EU level has been lower, like 800 million, as Javi said, while it was more than 2 billion in the UK. The scheme is different one. It's a fixed premium, as Javi said, in the EU. It's a contract for difference in the UK. So what is common is it is a payment per produced kilogram hydrogen, but kind of the details are a bit different. I come to that in a minute. Before we go to prices in more detail, like volumes also interesting. So as Javi said, in the EU was 7 projects with a total capacity of 1.5 gigawatt, mostly located in Spain and Portugal. And in the UK, it's been 11 projects with a total capacity of 125 megawatt, so much less. And the capacity range of single projects also much smaller, like 5 to 25 megawatt. And the auction results, as said, like roughly 0.5 euro per kilogram compared to 8. I could explain that in a minute. So that's kind of factor 16. So it's really worth to look into this in a bit more detail. And I think when I touch on that in a minute, I will also answer, like, or at least touch on many questions that have been raised in the chat, as far as I can see. As you said, Agara, there was also a auction in Denmark, which was a bit more similar to the EU auction, also a fixed premium mechanism, and also the price outcome was a bit similar. So I focus on the comparison of EU and UK to make it simple and crisp. I'm with Javier, like the low bid price is not only a result of outliers, it's really kind of, there's a whole curve of bids that went in below the price cap of 4.5 euro per kilogram, and also below the UK results. So how come? And there's basically kind of 3 different explanations to it as far as we see it at Frontier. One could be a lower production cost, so levelized cost of hydrogen, LCOH, that will lead to lower bids. Could be higher expectations on offtake prices, on revenues, or it could also be different bidding strategies. I think the question in the chat point to all of these 3 so far. So let us look at the UK auction first, like on the right-hand side here. So that is a so-called contract for difference, or CFD mechanism. So that means bidders bid for a strike price, which is like roughly equivalent to the cost, so the LCOH, and there's been the clearing price, or the average price has been 11 euro kilogram of the winning bids. And that's not paid, but it's the certain offtake or revenue estimation, so-called reference price, is deducted from that strike price. So that's like roughly 3 euros per kilogram on the reference price basis. And what's actually paid, so then the difference between the two, and that is like roughly 8 euro per kilogram, which is kind of the premium. That's why I said 8. And if we compare that to what we see at EU, that's roughly 0.5. So now the question, what's the difference? We don't know what's the reason. What we don't know is the exact cost or the offtake expectation of the winning bids. We have some aggregate information that Johanna and Javier just presented, but we don't know how that looks for the winning bids compared to the other many not winning bids. So it's a bit of kind of speculation, but one reason could be a lower cost that would then lead, like even if offtake price expectations would be the same, would lead to this low bid. And if we look at the information that we have on hydrogen cost, then we see indeed that in those countries with winning projects, the prices have been below this UK strike price of 11 euro per kilogram. So in Spain in particular, like the average price of all bids from Spain has been 5.8, and possibly the winning bids even lower than that, but we don't know that. And there's again kind of 3 potential explanations for it. One, and Javier mentioned that already, I think, possibly better renewable conditions in those countries. Another one is larger project sizes in EU compared to UK, and it could also be a matter of less strict conditions in the EU. And I touch on them now in turn. So just looking at cost estimations from other sources, like here on the left-hand side, Hydrogen Europe, it's not necessarily clear that the conditions are much better if you look at one kind of the least cost technology. For example, here it's like in Spain and UK, it's both wind and the estimated cost for kind of everything else equal is quite similar, given that in UK there's also very good wind conditions, for example. But what we see is, if we look at the winning bids in the EU auction, that most projects don't use only one source of renewables, but combine them. Like for example, the big winning bids, Catalina and MP2X, with 500 megawatt each, they combine solar and wind as far as we know, and thus lead to or result in very kind of high utilization or capacity factor, as we call it here, which of course lowers the hydrogen production cost. So that could be one factor, very likely. Another could be project size. So if we look at the sizes, we see that in the UK, it's much smaller projects until I think 25 megawatt, while in the EU, the 7 winning bids, they start with 35 and go until 500 megawatt. So much bigger. And obviously there is some economies of scale in the capex of the electrolyzer in particular. And in the UK, it's more likely kind of small scale pilot projects that are not necessarily kind of trying to achieve maximum efficiency, but also more laid out for testing and demonstration purposes. While that's different in the EU, where like with very big projects like 500 megawatt, it's more industrial scale production. So that could be another explanation for lower cost and thus lower bids. And then there's kind of the strictness of rules, if you want, and just a couple of examples. Time to operation is one thing to look at. In the EU, as Javier and Johanna already said, it has been 5 years in the first auction. So that gives some flexibility also to wait for cost decreases, for example, or also to use the auction as kind of a bit of an option to either then build the production facility or not. While in the UK, it's only been 2 years, so projects have had to be more advanced, and that may lead to kind of high cost. Then there's also the matter of temporal correlation, which is kind of the condition that production of electricity and hydrogen must happen at the same time. And in the EU, as many of you will know, there's a transition phase where there's only monthly correlation condition until 2029, and then hourly correlation kicks in later in 2030 for new projects then. So every project that goes into operation by 2029 has only to comply with monthly correlation. While in the UK, it's half hourly correlation straight ahead, and that has quite an impact on production cost, actually. We have done a study for RWE a couple of years back, so it's a bit outdated, but still kind of the message will be same. What we've seen there was the difference between monthly and quarter hourly, and in that example, correlation was roughly €1 per kilogram in production cost of hydrogen. So quite substantial. And then there's another factor, which is this so-called additionality. And there was already a question on that in the chat. Again, there's transition phase in the EU. So projects that go into operation before 2028, they don't have to be additional. So it can be like existing renewable electricity plants that are used for hydrogen production, and they can even be supported with government fund, and that may lower cost again. While in the UK, it's no formal additionality criteria, but additionality is used in the scoring of the projects. So again, that could be one driver of high cost in the UK. Then offtake. So even if costs were to be same, could be higher offtake expectations in the EU that lead to lower premia. And we've seen the information on offtake on the EU already from Johanna. In the EU and in the UK, it's a bit different because it's a contract for difference contract, but kind of this €3 per kilogram that I've been citing is kind of based on the expectation that green hydrogen is replacing natural gas, and actually this may be different in reality. So let's go to that. Maybe to speed up a little bit here. Start with the offtake prices in the EU may actually be higher than in the UK due to kind of higher willingness to pay. And one reason is the different CO2 pricing system, where in the EU the current price is €75 per ton, while in the EU it's significantly lower. So that of course increases the willingness to pay for green hydrogen in the EU compared to UK. And there's also further incentives that differ between the two countries that may also lead to higher willingness to pay. Then, as said, the €3 per kilogram in the UK is kind of an estimate on the reference price based on natural gas, but in reality, projects may be able to attract higher revenues, and then the large part of these higher revenues will actually be deducted from the strike price. So the actual premium that the projects then will get is lower than the €8 per kilogram. So that may be a bit of an overestimate if I keep citing this. This is to be kept in mind. And then lastly on offtake, as just said, in the UK, with this contract difference scheme, it's a variable premium. So the higher the offtake price, the lower the bid. And that's different in a fixed premium auction like in the EU, where actually the payments, the revenues are kind of topped up by a fixed premium. So whether you kind of earn your cost or not will depend on your expectations about future offtakes. And it may be that kind of the most optimistic bidders actually win the auction, which is something we call in economics winner's curse. So there could be an element of this. And this is also facilitated by the possibility you have internal off-takers in the EU auction. And then there's another element beside cost and offtake, and there's what we call strategic bidding here, where there may be a difference between the two systems. One's bid size. So actually there was a cap on EU maximum bids, which is no project could get more than 1/3 of the total budget. And actually for a big electrolyzer, like the two big ones that won 500 megawatt, that meant that they couldn't bid much more than 0.5 euro per kilogram, because otherwise they would have needed more than 1/3 of the total budget. So that could be one element or one explanation for low bids. Another is cumulative funding. So in the UK, there was strict policy not to accumulate different government support schemes. In the EU, there's a bit more flexibility on that to keep it maybe on that high level. And then also questions also, what are the other funding options? And again, there was a question in the chat on this, I think. So if there's no other opportunity to get funding and you're already quite advanced or you're really willing to build something, then you may live with lower fund and bid low. So to conclude,
I'm very sorry, but we are really running out of time.
Yeah.
So, and there are a lot of questions. So, can we?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it? I mean, did you get your message across, or are they?
I think so, and as I said, I think I covered a lot of questions, so that should be hopefully fine. Maybe give me 1 minute, and then we move over to questions. That's fine.
All right.
Okay, so maybe to conclude, I think it's a combination of lower costs, high offtake expectations, and some element of strategic bidding in the EU compared to UK. That maybe what can be interesting, but also happy to cover that later when we share the slides, is what these takeaways mean for like future rounds of the EU. And there are already, as Johanna said, some draft TNCs for the second round. And yeah, what maybe like to cover one is that, or two things maybe. One is it's not yet clear whether these projects will actually realize, whether they will actually be built. So the kind of completion guarantee change, for example, will have an influence on that going forward. And the other is, I wouldn't take the low bids necessarily for granted going forward, given all sorts of kind of special effects, for example, due to the transition in the delegated act for conditions to make hydrogen renewable. So that may change, and the TNCs will really have an influence on that. Yeah, let's leave it there. Thank you very much, and happy to answer questions. And I can also stay a little bit longer if that helps.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Matthias. And sorry to interrupt you, but we have only 9 minutes left, and Johanna and Javier need to go sharp at 3 o'clock. So maybe to start with some question, I will try. I don't know if you will be able to say something about this, because I saw another question in the chat. Is there? So I will try to put them together. They're from Julian Simple. One question asking if there's a technology overview of the granted projects, and another one from Dominic Legal, heading in the same direction. How is the technology split for the winning auctions? Can you say something about that?
Well, maybe I can jump in with it. So we cannot share at this moment more information of what we've shared in the screen. However, as Johanna mentioned during the presentation, beyond that classification on who the off-takers are in the groups of industry mobility, we are planning to give more information and more detail, because we have a lot of requests in that line. So in the next weeks, we will be able to publish that in the website. But of course, we can say that, as showed in the slides, producers of e-fuels, methanol, ammonia, and refineries have been among the top bidders, let's say, and definitely there's an important representation of those within the winners.
Maybe one small addition, because I understood the questions also to be about the winners. So we're treading a fine line between guarding the commercial secrets for the companies that get funding from us, which is really important to the Innovation Fund, and generating public value add with the data that we publish. So also for the winners, we intend to publish more information, however, only with the consent of these projects. So you can expect data on the winners, electrolyzer technology, offtake, does the electrolyzer come from Europe or from somewhere else, when they sign the grant. And we then publish for all projects that receive funding from the Innovation Fund, we publish a detailed project fiche that describes the project in more detail. However, we need the consent of the project to publish that type of information.
Yes. Thank you. Then also another question from Dominic Legal is, I will just read it out. We believe that the low results, at least in part, stem from tactical bids banking on future cost reductions and/or additional subsidies, leading to a high execution risk on the projects. What levers will you, the Commission, take to make sure projects are actually executed? And are you considering completion bonds? And then there's another one, the same in this question. We also see a risk of subsidizing Chinese companies with EU tax money, given the strong cost focus on the first auction. How do we make sure, I think I know your answer a little bit to that, that we also support European supply chain ramp up?
I can take the first part, and Javier, if you want to take the second part. So maybe on the execution risk. So we already have a completion bond. So the winners have to sign a deposit of 4% of the total subsidy volume. If they don't build, not only do they get not a single euro of tax money, they also lose the deposit. So we receive the deposit and we can roll it into next auction rounds. Now you may say 4% is not enough. This is a judgment choice on a scale. And in the first auction round, the priority was on making the first round a success, because if it hadn't been, there would have been no second round. So as you can see already in our draft T&Cs, we're suggesting to increase the amount of the completion bond from 4 to 10%, which already from our side indicates a shift towards more emphasis on project realization, given that we can be confident that there still will be enough bidders. However, that said, I think there is quite a lot of strong evidence that we don't just see speculative bids. First of all, 2/3 of all the bids stayed below €1.50. It's highly unlikely that all of these bids are taking strategic losses with their bids. And among the winners, there's at least 2 projects which are not sponsored by utilities, which have a strategic reason to maybe take a loss, but they're sponsored by investment funds. And these projects really have no economic incentives to take a loss, because the only purpose of a fund is to return to the managing partner. So I think the judgment will be also up to you, but I would encourage you to look in detail at the winners and who has an incentive to take a strategic loss with a bid and who may not have that incentive, because there's definitely some bidders who don't.
Me taking the response on the second one, this is of course a question that we're receiving quite often at this moment, which is about how we are ensuring that we are supporting technology made in Europe. It's what we call this resiliency of the European value chains. So at this moment, as you've seen in our slides, we've seen that most of the projects that have applied for the pilot action are actually in pre-contractual agreements with in this case electrolyzers being provided by EU-based companies. We're talking about almost 2/3 of them. Half of them saying that they will procure it from the EU, and and almost 2/3 saying that it will be a mix of EU or EU-based. So although we're not seeing an issue at this moment with information we have in place, we know that this can be, of course, a challenge for European industry in the future. At this moment, for the second round, what we are doing is, well, requesting information or more detailed information about where the electrolyzer is planning to be produced or procured in order to be able to assess the situation. And then, of course, if we decide to take any measure to protect or to make the European value chain more resilient, it will be always within the international obligations of the EU and within the WTO rules. So at this moment, that is the situation we're having. We are gathering information. Any further action we will be discussing in the coming months if it can be implemented.
Thank you. I know we don't have a lot of time left. We have a lot of questions, but maybe allow me 2 or 3 more. One, which particularly I also want to know. Apparently, for the next auction, you are planning to have a dedicated funding for the maritime sector. So why the maritime sector? So why have you chosen the maritime sector, and why not for others? This is also a question. I was quite curious, but this is a question that Neria Martinez is asking.
Maybe I can respond this directly. So the special support that we're giving to the maritime sector in the second call is basically based on the mandate of the ETS directive. So the Emission Trading System Directive sets a certain amount of allowances provided to the maritime sectors and mandates the Innovation Fund to give a special support to this sector to have dedicated calls or topics to the maritime sector. So we think, based on the results of the pilot auction and the high participation of projects that have us an off-taker in the maritime sector, that it makes sense to have a dedicated budget to it to allow those that are providing mostly ammonia to the maritime sector a basket and space for bidding between them. So that is the main reason why.
Joanna, you don't want to add anything on that? And then maybe to go to Matthias, so to make a bridge between the two of you. So Matthias suggested actually to open the auction to imports of RFNBOs from outside of the EU. I know that this is actually part of DG ENA, not DG Klima. However, I mean, we highly need, or we are really big need of these sustainable fuels. So what and when, or what do you want to do, or the Commission, on this issue, and when can we actually expect some answers?
Yes, great question. So maybe first from the Innovation Fund and DG Klima perspective, we legally cannot fund projects outside the territory of the Union. So the Innovation Fund was never intended to be and will never be, unless we reopen the ETS directive, a source of funding for imports. It's not the right instrument. We're simply not designed to do that. That said, the Commission recognizes that imports are highly important. That's recognized in the hydrogen strategy, in the Repower EU program, etc. However, I'm being very frank here, we do have a budget issue. We're coming towards the end of the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF, and at the moment there's cuts everywhere, not extra money. So the best DG Energy colleagues can do at the moment is to facilitate voluntary contribution by member states and to help member states pool funds for imports, but there are currently no EU dedicated funds for imports. And before the next budget, that is unlikely to change unless additional revenues are identified. So at the moment, what the Commission is doing is to facilitate coordination of national resources, but there are no dedicated EU resources for this in this MFF.
Thank you. Maybe one a little bit more critical question, and then we can. It's unfortunately an anonymous participant saying most of bidders seem to take advantage of the grandfathering rule and use an existing and possibly state aid co-finance renewable energy sources, thanks to EIO. Before 2028. I think this is also a little bit what Matthias flagged. But it means that after 2037, their RFNBO production capacity is at risk because the necessity to find out new RFNBO compliance renewable energy sources. Oh, that was too quick. Won't be there. So the question basically was additionality criteria, the time. What is your response to that? And how do you want to secure European RFNBO production capacity after 2037?
Also, I can jump a bit here. So 2 things here, because I see that state aid was mentioned. We have clear rules to limiting the accumulation with state aid from other sources, not only from state aid from nations, but also from other EU funding. In summary, and I see that Johanna has to leave. Johanna, and I will take over.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you very much. Bye.
So to be very clear, a project cannot receive the support from the Innovation Fund through these auctions for costs that are receiving already state aid or any other EU funding. And this is basically summarized in, if your project is receiving CAPEX or OPEX support, you cannot receive funding from our auction, from the state aid. So that being very clear. The other thing about additionality. So first of all, as we've mentioned before, we are trying to ensure that these projects come into construction by having this completion. So they have 5 years to enter into operation, and we expect that would be enough. And they have, according to the auctions, to the results of the pilot auction, it seems that projects are willing to take that commitment. If not, we have this penalty of the 4% of the total grant that has been requested. Beyond that, and then during the implementation, we have certain limits or certain conditions for the production that has to be, of course, respected. And the payments will only be received for any amount of volumes that can be certified as RFNBO. That means that that certification must be aligned with provisions of the delegated acts. So again, thinking about that additionality condition that will be valid for these projects that enter into operation before 2028, it will be valid until 2038. At least they will have 9 years that they will not have to comply with the additionality condition in order to be able to certify the hydrogen that they're producing. But us, as Innovation Fund, and under these auctions, the only thing that we are requesting is certify your hydrogen according to the Renewable Energy Directive delegated acts, whatever it means at the moment of production. So it's not binding at the moment of being awarded. So I hope that answers all, I think, the combined questions that were made.
Thank you very much, Javier. Maybe a question to Matthias, but Javier, please feel free to jump in as well. But when you see, I think you also mentioned it, Matthias, that some member states that actually also are in need of RFNBOs don't have the possibilities. And maybe some, like Germany, will use the auction as a service, but other countries, so I could see there was Bulgaria and Estonia with really nearly 8 times as high their bid as the winning ones. So what can be done for them? What can be done for member states actually that are not able, because maybe their national budget doesn't allow it really, to use the auction as a mechanism? So maybe first to Matthias and then Javier. I'm very, very curious to hear what you say.
Yeah, I guess like first question is like, to what extent does, like, from an economic point of view, is it really kind of desired to ensure that there's production everywhere if the conditions are such that costs are like much higher? Then of course another alternative is for those countries to kind of import hydrogen or hydrogen derivatives from places where the conditions are better suited. So it's not, to me, it's not clear cut that you want to kind of guarantee production equally distributed over the continent. If a country wants definitely wants to kind of, for example, because it has certain like targets to attract local production, and then auction as a service is a mechanism. But of course, as you say, it requires kind of budget, which not all countries have. And then there's obviously also other kind of opportunities, like for domestic incentive regimes that often also comes, of course, with budget needs. There's also like obligations, of course, that you can do, like quota or whatever. But that again comes also with kind of cost. So there's no, I guess there's no way to avoid any sort of cost related to this. But happy for Javier to answer whether he sees any kind of easy ways here.
Thank you, Matthias. But also now, again, stressing how important imports will actually be, particularly for those countries. Javier, what do you think about that? What is your answer?
Yeah, so on our actions, of course, we're seeing that there's different participation, of course, depending on the country of origin. We are not planning to have any geographical balance condition at this moment. We still having a philosophy of having this auction of a European level auction in order to be as cost efficient as possible. We are not thinking of it as trying to support more specific regions against other. No, we're thinking that this as competitive level at European level. What we've done is actually those simulation rules. Those simulation rules that we have received a lot of comments on are actually meant to guarantee that level playing field and to ensure that those projects that are located in countries that are receiving more support from the countries because they can put that in place are compete at the same conditions as those that are located in countries that cannot receive so much support. So that is the main reason why we have these simulation rules, and that is the main tool that we've used to ensure that level playing field from all, regardless of the origin of the countries, I would say.
Okay, and maybe because we're now really 10 minutes over time, a very technical question. I had this and I saw this question here in the Q&A as well. So just to make sure that someone in the audience who also wants to participate in the next auction doesn't make the same mistake. There were 13 projects that were deemed not eligible. Can you just tell us what did they do wrong so future developers don't make the same mistake?
That is an easy one, because eligibility and admissibility for us is it's very straightforward conditions. Like, for example, you don't have all the documents that have been requested, or you have submitted information in more pages than requested, or you are sending a completion guarantee that is not for 4% as we requested but 3%. So or you're not located in the EU. So eligibility and admissibility is all these conditions are listed in our call text and are in general very straightforward. During evaluation, during the assessment of the criteria, if I have to give one advice, is trying to be consistent across all documents. Many projects are just failed because they provide contradicting information in the financial information and in the description of the project. And since it cannot be evaluated, as soon as there is contradiction and inconsistency, it cannot be evaluated anymore. That is one of the main reasons of failure, not only in the auction, but in the innovation fund as a whole. And that would be my main advice. Read the call text in detail, read every sentence, and try to be consistent in your application.
Thank you very much, Javier. Javier, we have really a lot of questions and not enough time to cover all of them. We in the EFIL Alliance would, because I think there's a lot of interest, you can see, would you mind if we collect the question, try to cluster them, so not give you all the questions, but like similar questions, to forward them to you whenever you have the chance to answer them, so we can go back to our audience, to the participants, and provide them with the answers, because I think it is important, particularly looking ahead for the next auction.
Yes, no problem with that. I will be happy to receive those questions. However, I want to remind everyone that we have this session, this feedback period open through our website. So if there are any questions on the next round of options, or why we are taken certain decisions, it cannot always be provided to us through a feedback template that we have available on the website. And also, I encourage everyone to participate in the workshop of June the 12th that we organize in Brussels, but it will be also online. And that is the moment in which we will be discussing, explaining, and providing and reacting to the feedback of everyone. So yeah, we are happy to receive your questions, but also I want to remind everyone that we have the tools available for that.
Great. Thank you very much. So, dear audience, thank you for your question, and you heard it. So we will get back to you, but in case you have some questions that are not here in the chat, please send them to us. To info@efuel-alliance.eu. And with this, many thanks to Matthias Janssen from Frontier Economics and to Javier Garcia Fernandez. It was great having you here. Thank you for your insights, and I wish you a lovely afternoon.
Thank you for the organization and the attention. Bye-bye.
Bye.